Want your brand to be seen and be remembered? Effective campaigns need both. JC.co's high-quality billboard sites in premium locations nationwide offer brands powerful and visible stages for emotive, impactful and influential storytelling. Find out how JC.co can help your brand be seen and be remembered at www.beseenberemembered.co.nz. No mai, hoki mai, ki a the fold, e mihi nei, ko Duncan Greive, tōku ingoa, joined again, less than, I think it's about 24 hours since we last spoke, by Glen Kyne. Welcome, Glen.
G'day, Duncan. What a day.
Yeah, and this is obviously an emergency pod to discuss this morning's very dramatic news, albeit stuff that we have kind of between us nodded at over the past few months, that Sky New Zealand will be buying the New Zealand assets of Discovery New Zealand, which is TVNZ, Rush and HGTV and some other channels. But largely the big prize is obviously Three in a sort of linear broadcast space, and TVNZ as a ad-supported video on demand platform. What do you reckon?
I think this is amazing. I'm really pleased to see this deal consummated and come together. I think it's fantastic for WBD. I'm looking forward, and for Three in particular. It's the brand that keeps on keeping on.
Refuses to die.
Yep,
It loses a limb every now and then, but it will not quit.
And I feel like it's now at a home where it will be well loved and thrive into the future. And for Sky, I'm really excited for Sky because I can absolutely see how this deal gives them a lot of strategic leverage in the market in terms of a growth pathway for the next few years.
Yeah, so what we're going to do today is quickly run through what it means for Sky, for Three, for TVNZ, for Stuff, and for the ad market, whatever else we can think of. Let's start with Sky. They're the acquirer. They bought a business that was sold for US $20 million less than 5 years ago for $1.
Can't comment on the details, Duncan.
I wouldn't possibly ask. But on the face of it, that seems like a pretty exceptional deal for them.
Yeah, I think part of the subtext sitting behind all of this, which we should just discuss briefly, is, and we've discussed it on this podcast, is recently WBD announced a split into two divisions: a networks division, which TV3 is a part of, or Three is a part of, and studios and streaming, which is theatrical movies, HBO Max, and the like. And so those two divisions, now that the company's split, their futures on a global basis are unclear. And as it's unclear, by default, it means the future for Three is a little unclear, right? And so there is a benefit in WBD meeting the moment, realising that there's an opportunity here to see Three sold strategically to a strategic partner who's going to value it into the future. So I can understand, out of all the parties, I guess in New Zealand and abroad that could have done this deal, Sky makes a lot of sense because of the strategic benefit for Three. For Sky, this strategy of, wanting to become, the most relevant media company in New Zealand, this helps really bring that to life. It gives them assets that they don't currently have. It gives them a revenue stream and leverage in the market that they don't currently have. Excitingly, it gives them a digital pathway at scale that they don't currently have. I think it's just a brilliant deal. Yeah,
it looks like a home run from the outside. And interestingly, I spoke to Aaron Ibbotson, who is an analyst who covers Sky for Forsyth Barr earlier this morning, and Forsyth Barr and a lot of the sort of institutional investors in Sky, they effectively exercise a right of veto on the proposed coming together of MediaWorks and Sky in 2022, and so I was curious about the shareholder perspective, because they didn't really get a choice with this. They just, I'm sure that it might have been kind of canvassed quietly, but they wake up and the deal's done, and he was very complimentary about it. Obviously, the price, $1, is right, but also that this is Sky already spends a ton of money on content. It seeks to make a lot of money out of advertising. this just gives them a free-to-air channel, which, for all the good that they've done with Sky Open in recent years, Three has got a much bigger brand, much bigger audience. As people know it, it's much more part of people's sort of habitual rotation. And so for them to have that as a place that, they bought it debt-free, but they take on all of the ongoing contracts, which include the staff contract, which we'll talk about. But so there are costs associated with it. But over time, they're just content in wholesale and then content out retail. But having Three as part of the places they can put things, that just seems amazing.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. This deal couldn't have been done 2 years ago or a year ago, with the cost structure of that, Three was carrying, and obviously, post the difficult decision and the closure of News Hub, what that has clearly done by resetting the Three business model has created the optionality for this deal to now happen, because Sky's not inheriting necessarily a legacy cost base that's going to be problematic. Now, in saying that, Sky will need to absolutely pay very close attention to the costs and no doubt realise synergy benefits by bringing the organisations together and removing any duplication that does exist, and they will be well onto that. But the revenue side is really, really interesting, because now you've got a genuine stronger competitor against TVNZ in both the linear and the digital front. And even though, linear television, the trends are the trends, which we've talked about ad nauseum on the show, what the scale of bringing these two together allows for is for Sky to do bigger commercial deals in the market with advertisers and with advertising agencies. It makes their sponsorships more valuable, where they can extend them out onto a brand like Three rather than Sky Open. It opens up, my view is that when you think about Sky and the quality of the content that they have in their walled garden environment, and particularly in a digital environment, digital being not just on Neon and Sky Sport Now, but also the digital experience on the Sky Box, they should be the biggest digital video advertiser in New Zealand. And now I think this really cements this by having something like Three now help underpin all of that and create scale.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? The what it does to the ad market. I mean, Sky has been effectively the only scale participant that's seen their advertising go up, and that Lauren Quaintance, who's head of media and for them, has really driven that. And you can see that, when you're watching sports, there'll be these kind of wraparound boxes. They're just putting it in more, the pause ads on Neon. There's been both a technology and a sales emphasis on it, and I think when you imagine Three as being part of that sort of portfolio, I think before, correct me if I'm wrong, you really didn't have a choice but to buy TVNZ because it held so much of the market. I feel like
they were always the first one bought on the media plan. Yep.
I can imagine now, and I'm not saying this will happen, but if you're planning in a local context, a joined up Sky and Three, and thinking about Three now as well, like you're capturing a pretty sizable audience there, and particularly potentially quite a valuable one because of the self-selecting nature of Sky subscribers being people who are naturally in the top half of New Zealand's household incomes.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Sky historically, the way they traded in the commercial market is Sky channels, for example, were always sold after the free-to-air channel was sold. So, for example, Sky Open, what used to be Prime, was the anchor to create reach for advertisers, and then the other channels were added in to a media buy. If you just imagine the reach of Sky Open versus the reach now of Three and the scale that creates, it just opens up a much broader opportunity of advertisers to come in. And you're right, the audience, the profile of the audience on Three does look very different to Prime and to the traditional Sky Channel customer. That's going to be really attractive to the market. And I think, the job here is take all the leverage that they can at a scale. They're not necessarily going to change the trends that underpin the broadcast TV industry, but if they thought that had a 3 to 5 year timeline in isolation with Sky Open, maybe that has a 6 to 7 year timeline now by making this acquisition. So it builds runway, which I think is really, really important. There's a long tail of revenue that's going to be collected through that runway. More importantly, again, the focus on digital revenues and building off some of the capabilities that Three have, including some of the good work that Sky have already done over the last 12 months. That's going to really and should lift the BVOD market. That's going to, in theory, lift all boats. TVNZ should benefit from that as well. But it means that the stronger the BVOD market, it allows for the linear market to have a bit more life in it.
Thinking about Sky Open briefly, that now becomes a clear second channel, the sort of TVNZ2 to Three's TVNZ1 in the Sky portfolio. What do you think they'll do there? Sort of it strikes me as you could make that a free-to-air sports channel. There's a lot of different ways they can make use of that. Do you have any sort of instinct around what the move would be?
I don't think there'll be a concrete plan on that yet. I think that there's an opportunity. First of all, you should note that the content that sits behind, Three and Sky Open, the different contracting parties. So there's a lot of kind of back end work to figure out how do you bring those contracts together under a single entity that then gives you the option to do what you're suggesting. I think one of the things that will be interesting is if you think about Three at the moment on TV3 and then 3+1. 3+1 is in a much better asset position on the EPG on your television screen than Sky Open. Do they consider starting to move some of the channels around? That would be a smart move. It'll give them much bigger bang for buck from day one. I think over time, once they figure out the contracting of who owns the contracts with the content. And I think part of this deal, by the way, which is acknowledged in the release, is that even though Sky are only paying $1, there is an expanded content agreement that sits behind that for them to access the content library that Three is accessing today via the WBD catalogue. So in that respect, Sky will be having a bigger financial commitment, no doubt, to WBD to enable that. But, the options, once you sort out the contracting, are immense. You could bring an hour delayed Super Rugby game onto Three on a Saturday night. You could create extended news product now, potentially, and we can come back to that. Some of the marquee content that sits on the HBO channel and on HBO Max on Neon, do you start to think about windowing previous episodes or previous series on Three? There are just so many options, and I think that's what's exciting about this. They've got a great asset portfolio now that they can really have some fun with. Yeah,
I think that the being able to kind of like Three post the end of News Hub has, because in part, of that WBD ownership has gone in a particular direction with its programming. Naturally, you use the stuff that is cheap or free to you, and that sort of has a flow and impact to brand. But because Sky has got such a broad and such a premium portfolio there is an opportunity to take the fight to TVNZ to actually outflank it in terms of some of the, HBO is still kind of unmatched as far as premium content goes. TVNZ has had a good run with sports, but Sky will always monster it, and obviously as the Spark Sport contracts kind of winnow away, that gets less and less. So it's a pretty formidable opponent.
It is, and part of the strategy here would be no doubt to protect Three. The more premium they can continue to make Three, and then the stronger the individual channel identities they can create for the other channels, that's where some of the gold is going to be in the advertising community, so that they look different, not just, if you think about TVNZ 1 and 2, obviously they have different brand identities, but they're general entertainment channels. Sky have the opportunity to create quite bespoke niche programming strategies with the channels off Three and to make Three even more premium. And so it's just really exciting. And I think from a shareholder point of view, it's a bit of a no-brainer, I would think, from, the investment community, because, on the face of it, even though they will have to manage the cost base, it's very low risk based on the purchase price. And this is an inherently complementary deal. The assets that they are buying are complementary to the assets that Sky already own, and you put them together, they make Sky stronger.
So let's flip this around and look at it from TVNZ's point of view. They've always had this kind of we're number one thing. I think under Jodie that has been opening up a bit to an extent, and there's a natural humbling from going from being the literal only supplier of television decades ago to the kind of complex media environment that we live in now. But notwithstanding, while TVNZ lost Sunday and Fair Go, Three lost News Hub. Like that. These are the kind of force multiplier events that have been hitting the different companies. Now suddenly their local competitor set looks really different. How do you think they'll view this?
In some respects, I would hope that TVNZ don't veer off strategy too much. Do you know what I mean? I think that they understand the pressures that exist in the current operating model. They're investing heavily into TVNZ Plus. They're looking to optimize and again extend the runway of the linear business. All those things need to continue to be true, and they need to be careful not to knee-jerk too much because of a competitor. Stay focused on what they're doing. But unquestionably, over the next 6 to 12 months, what they will be doing in the commercial market is looking to shore up their place, and so that the Sky benefit of being able to bring together these assets and create more scale with the advertisers, the benefit of that is minimised as much as possible from TVNZ's point of view. So they will be very active in the commercial market with all of their commercial agreements and things, trying to block Sky or to slow down the realisation of that benefit. But apart from that, I mean, you wouldn't. It's tricky for TVNZ, right? Because it's not like they can go and spend an extra $20-30 million on a new content supply agreement or buy another asset. Some of those things are very challenging for TVNZ. So they do need to stick to their core and become operationally excellent at what they're doing and continue that development path for TVNZ Plus.
The JC Billboard Network delivers quality reach via commanding sites to ensure your campaign is visible and impactful. With superior screen quality and premium locations, JC can help your campaign be seen and be remembered. Visit www.beseenberemembered.co.nz to learn more. So TVNZ, one thing that it retains a clear advantage in is the sort of they call it the Aotearoatanga, that sense of being rooted here and that being a kind of a big part of their kind of identity and how they present. They've got all the things that Three gave up when it gave up News Hub in terms of personalities that people have these long-running relationships with, new shows that sort of start at 6 a.m. and run into the evening. And then also like a local programming slate, both digitally and on linear, that is just much kind of richer and more threaded through what they're doing. Do you think that Sky has the potential to kind of eat into that, or is that sort of force TVNZ something that they can lean on and say, this is a very hard fortress for you to kind of get through from if not a standing start, then certainly a long way back?
I think if you look under Sophie's leadership, she has made a very concerted effort to bring that kind of Aotearoatanga into the Sky brand at every step. And so she will be passionate about extending that on the back of this deal. I think in terms of what happens when, some of these things will take a little while to shake out and to go through the integration of the company. But if you think about the decision to create a piece of local programming on Three, for example, right now, which has been very challenged. I mean, they have been bringing it back, but it has been challenged, versus making a piece of local programming on Sky Open. The ability to get a return on their investment by putting the production into Three, having a window on 3Now, having potentially a window on Neon, depending on what the show is, all of a sudden opens up the ROI capability on those investment decisions. And so they will absolutely have an eye to that. And I know, that strategy of making Sky near and dear to New Zealanders' hearts is, front and centre of how she thinks about that business.
From New Zealand and Air's point of view, on some level, this is a shrinking of the market. Now effectively two major players in the television space. I know that at times they have expressed a level of frustration. I've heard expressed privately about the way that TVNZ kind of has a level of assumption about its entitlements as regards New Zealand On Air funding. But so while it's less competition, it's more even competition. What do you think their view of this will be?
I think they'll be thrilled. In fact, I know they're thrilled, having spoken to someone in there this morning. I think that by having on one of the options, I guess, into the future was there was no Three, right? And so maintaining Three with the opportunity to increase investment into local production is only going to be a good thing for New Zealand On Air. And I guess one of the ways to think about Sky now is to think about just the broad array of assets that they have available to them that they can create programming around. So it's, they've now got TVNZ, Neon, the channels, they have a number of kind of weapons in their arsenal, if you like, that they can invest into to get a return. So I think New Zealand On Air will be happy. The government will be happy. And I think all of New Zealand actually should be very happy because you can expect to see, strong programming and a strong engagement from a viewership point of view over many years to come.
So Stuff is obviously extremely interested in this. They took the big gamble, a brave move last year to take over production of 3 News' 6 p.m. bulletins. They published a story on this online, which and it was unbylined, but I was kind of amused by it, I should say, just because you the amount of this is what it means for Stuff versus what it means for Sky or Three was kind of shocking. But fair enough, it is very impactful for them. That local news product hasn't rated as well as they might have hoped, but still feels really important. And as you alluded to earlier, there does seem like there's a clear opportunity to make a case for investing further, making the channel and the news product more sort of sewn into Three, potentially into other aspects of what Sky does. What do you think what do you think it does to the way they look at news and their content mix?
Yeah, I don't think Sky is going to invest in a new newsroom anytime soon. I think those days are past, but I think the opportunity to leverage into that partnership in a more meaningful way absolutely exists. Potentially, if you think about the Sky portfolio, what Stuff could do for them with sport, for example, with Three potentially being an outlet for that may be an opportunity. Is there room for a 7 p.m, hard-hitting current affairs show to come back? Those things, there'll be no decisions about any of that right now, but they will all be options that are sitting on the table to look at that give them an opportunity to strengthen the portfolio. And the one beautiful thing about doing the deal with 3 News and Stuff is Stuff having amazing news gathering capability creates options to create more content. 3 have the broadcast platform to be able to bring that content to life. So it's a really effective partnership in that sense. And based on wanting to get a quick or to make sure that on the back of the business case this deal was done on and the ROI, and they've made some predictions about both profit and free cash flow into the future, those targets must be met. And so the performance of things like news will be under the spotlight, and they'll be coming together to make sure that they can do everything they can to enhance that.
So in terms of the sort of suppliers to Sky and Three, thinking particularly sports rights holders and the production sector, it feels similar to New Zealand On Air in a way, in that, yes, there is one less kind of ultimate corporate parent in the market, but the combined power, one of the big issues that has been persistently identified with the likes of New Zealand Rugby and New Zealand Cricket, and that's why being on TVNZ was so great for cricket, is that you lose some audience reach by being behind a paywall. The ability when striking deals to say, actually, we're going to give you more free-to-air than you've had before, more prominence on Three, make that a big part of their offering, even if there's elements of delayed broadcast there. And then similarly with the production sector, while it's not going to be, a return to the old days of, just kind of commissioning on a pure commercial basis, you wouldn't think. A show like The Block, which for a quite a constrained company like Discovery NZ might have been a hard one to commission. If Sky gets sufficient confidence out of its kind of commercial decision, maybe it can start to look at, can they start to commission local programming off their own bat again? Do you see that, or do you think that potentially they're going to need to be restrained on that front even into the future?
I think, they've talked about in the release that they gain an incremental, almost 100 million revenue out of doing this deal as a company, and all of that revenue sits in the advertising market. It kind of, Sky go from a $55 million advertising business to $155 million advertising business. And so with potential to keep on scaling that. So there's room and growth in the market in the advertising sector through this deal. And so when they think about programming, the first thing they're going to be thinking about is, okay, how does this potentially impact our ad revenue? Now, shows like The Block, shows things like sport rights, all of these things, the ability to extend them into a premium free-to-air channel like Three raises the value of those sponsorships and those partnerships, brings different revenue, different advertisers into the mix. And so there's a huge opportunity. There'll be no concrete plans about any of this right now, but all of those things will be on the table. And even though Three hasn't been producing a lot of original content in the last couple of years, it still holds a lot of rights to a lot of those formats, and so they can be brought back to life. And so I think the production community, to a degree, everyone's going to be getting ahead of themselves, pontificating on exactly what this looks like, but especially the production community, I imagine.
I love to pontificate, and fair enough.
But it's going to take a little while. But absolutely, like, all things are back on the table. Do you know what I mean? But Sky cannot and must not, for the sake of Three and for the sake of their own business, jeopardise the business case by which this deal was done on. They have to realise both the cost and revenue outcomes that predicated this deal being done.
Well, that's probably enough speculation about what it might mean. It's will obviously become clear over time, and we will continue to cover it. But yeah, huge, another huge day for New Zealand's media. Last year was about a lot of very painful cutting. This one's been much more about changes in ownership and a kind of a consolidation, rationalisation story, and that continues now. This probably is up there with the Trade Me investment into Stuff as among the biggest of the year. We will continue to watch. Thank you so much for coming up, Glenn.
Thanks, Duncan. Good to be here.
And thank you, Ti, here for jumping in to record yet again. Seeing is not enough. With optimized data tools and insights, the JC2Co Billboard Network helps brands be remembered. Dedicated to closing the loop between impression and action, JC2Co can help your campaign be seen and be remembered. Visit www.beseenberemembered.co.nz to learn more.